He stood firm, tall, and unbending. "No entry without proper clearance," the young officer said, his voice steady, his hand raised like a locked gate. But the man in front of him did not move. His shoulders bore the quiet weight of years, not from age alone, but from burdens only a few could truly understand. His eyes, though softened by time, still held a steady fire. His left sleeve was carefully pinned, a silent reminder of what he had given long ago. The air between them tightened. A small line began to form behind the older man. A mother shifted her child from one arm to the other. A businessman glanced at his watch, but no one stepped forward. No one spoke. "Sir," the young officer repeated, this time more firmly, "I cannot allow you to pass without valid identification." The older man's hand shook slightly as he pulled out a worn identification card. The edges were frayed. The ink had begun to fade. The photo on it showed a much younger face, but the eyes were unmistakable. The officer gave it only a brief glance before shaking his head. Outdated. Not accepted anymore. His voice carried no malice, but it also held no kindness. Just the certainty of someone who knew the rules and was bound to them. The old man lowered his hand slowly, sliding the card back into his pocket like a fading memory. His lips parted, maybe to speak, maybe to explain, but no words came. He simply gave a small nod, turned, and began to walk away. Just before he passed the final pillar at the gate, his gaze lifted to the flag waving gently above. A flag he once stood under, a flag that had been his home in distant places, a flag that still meant everything to him. His fingers twitched slightly, perhaps wanting to rise in a salute, but he let them fall. Behind him, the young officer turned, his attention to the next person in line, unaware that something deeply important had just walked away. The man's name was Colonel James Mercer, and the building he had just been denied entry to was the very military base he had helped protect many years ago. James Mercer's life had been shaped by service. At 19, he answered the call of duty. At 21, he faced a day that changed him forever. At 22, he stood at a ceremony, quietly honoring the friends he would carry in his heart for the rest of his life. His days had been filled with long marches, distant postings, and quiet courage. The sharp scent of morning dew on his uniform and the soft echoes of footsteps on parade grounds still stayed with him. The sense of responsibility never left, even when his uniform was carefully folded and stored away. There were mornings when he would walk by the base just to hear the cadence of new soldiers training. He never interrupted. He never reminded anyone of who he was. He just watched, content to see the next generation continue the mission. But this day was different. This day was personal. It marked the anniversary of a moment that would forever tie him to the place beyond those gates. It was the day he had promised to remember those who could not return, the men whose names were now carved on a quiet stone wall inside the base. And yet, despite all of this, the entrance had been closed to him. Because to one young officer, his card did not meet the standard. His worth had gone unseen. The young officer, Lieutenant Bradley Knox, had always believed that following the rules was the highest form of respect. His father had served. His grandfather had served. The weight of family tradition sat squarely on his shoulders to him. The rules were clear. Passes must be current. IDs must be verified. Procedures must be followed. He believed that structure was what held everything together. But Lieutenant Knox had not yet learned how to see the quiet stories that sometimes walked without fanfare. He had not yet learned to recognize the value of silent service that he stood at his post, satisfied he had done the right thing. He convinced himself he had protected the base, just as he had been trained to do, until his radio came to life. "Lieutenant Knox, General Arden is requesting you immediately. He's on his way to the gate." The urgency in the voice caught him off guard. Within minutes, a black SUV approached. It stopped, and out stepped General Marcus Arden, a man whose steady leadership and clear sense of honor were known throughout the ranks. He walked straight to Lieutenant Knox. "Did you just turn away Colonel James Mercer?" Arden's voice was calm, but there was a sharp edge to it, quiet but unmistakable. "Yes, sir," Knox answered confidently. His identification was expired. The pause that followed felt like the world had briefly stopped turning. "Do you know who Colonel Mercer is?" the general asked, his eyes fixed on the young officer. Knox hesitated. "He's the veteran, sir. Colonel Mercer is the reason this base still stands. His leadership made the difference when we needed it most. His story is carved in the walls you guard. Knox's breath caught. His training, his certainty, his rules, all suddenly seemed much smaller. You sent him away, Arden said quietly. Those words landed heavier than any raised voice could have. Go. Bring him back. Knox's chest tightened as he hurried past the gates, searching the street. His eyes scanned desperately until he spotted the older man moving slowly toward a nearby bus stop. Sir, please wait, Knox called out. The colonel paused but didn't turn. Knox caught up, his words catching in his throat. Sir, please. The general has asked for you to return. He insists. Colonel Mercer turned, his steady gaze soft but unreadable. My ID wasn't valid. Knox's voice cracked slightly. No ID could ever measure your value here, sir. For the first time that day, a small smile tugged at Mercer's lips. He didn't speak, but his silence said more than words ever could. When they returned, the base was still. Conversation stopped. Movement slowed. Soldiers stepped aside as Colonel Mercer passed. Word had spread. General Arden met him halfway. The two men exchanged a firm handshake, their eyes filled with shared understanding. General Arden turned to those gathered. Colonel, James Mercer does not need permission to walk here. This is his place, his story, his legacy, and no gate will ever close to him again. The soldiers around them straightened, their faces bright with pride and respect. Some saluted, some simply bowed their heads. All understood the moment in that instant. Without a command being given, the entire base stood in quiet honor that a young soldier whispered to another. He once walked away. This time, we won't let him. That afternoon, Lieutenant Knox walked with Colonel Mercer through the base's halls. They passed framed photographs, plaques, and quiet reminders of service. They stopped at the memorial wall, where names were carved in stone. Mercer gently traced the letters of a name he knew by heart. Daniel Hargrove. A friend. A brother in arms. Knox stood respectfully beside him. After a long pause, Mercer spoke softly. We all leave parts of ourselves in places like this, in stories, in friendships, at gates. Knox's voice was quiet. I didn't see you, sir. I only saw the rule. Mercer's eyes remained on the wall. Rules are important, but sometimes respect builds the door we all need. The words settled into Knox's heart like a lesson he would carry forever. As Mercer turned to leave, Knox found the courage to ask, Sir, may I walk with you? These halls shouldn't be walked alone. Mercer's quiet nod was all the answer needed. Weeks later, a new sign appeared at the base entrance. In honor of Colonel James Mercer, all veterans welcome. No ID required. Beneath it, in brass letters, rules are important, but respect builds doors. No ID could ever measure your value here. We all leave parts of ourselves in places like this, in stories, in friendships, at gates. Rules are important, but respect builds doors. There are people who walk among us without badges, without papers, without reminders of what they've done. But their stories are written in quiet moments, in steady steps, in silent courage. Sometimes, the greatest respect we can show is simply to notice them. Where are you watching from? What does this story mean to you? Please share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe in honoring those who served, consider subscribing for more stories like this, stories that deserve to be remembered.